And we are back and joined by Pastor Chuck Baldwin. Now, Chuck Baldwin, of course, led the Constitution Party to its most successful run in 2008. And Congressman Ron Paul, Dr. No, who voted no on every tax increase, illegal wars, everything, who did he endorse when he was unable to win the nomination for the Republicans? Was it John McCain? Because, hey, that's what you're supposed to make the party like you. No, he endorsed the only other person running with principle, and that was Chuck Baldwin, Pastor Chuck Baldwin, author, radio host. And he joins us now. I'm not going to spend all day getting into the Pauls. We love Ron Paul. We love Rand Paul. They're both good men, but they've hired a bunch of mainstream Republican advisors. Their Campaign for Liberty is starting to endorse people whose wives are CFR, who support property taxes in Texas, Mr. Cruz. We're seeing a bunch of other stuff, supporting sanctions on Iran, which Ron Paul has said is an act of war. It is. I'm not a fan of the mullahs, but I don't want another globalist war. We're seeing a big change from Rand, getting lined up to run for president later, they say. They said, well, we got to make mainline Republicans like us. Funny, I thought we should be the alternative to mainline Republicans and Democrats and the rest of them and point out the Constitution. We don't change, we change the world. I mean, compromise has gotten us here, but I'm ranting on the subject because it's personal for me. I ignored a lot of the signs the last 6 months that Rand was starting to go mainstream, and then Rand called us up to come on. I thought, he's giving us a bone, and I've just got to say it. We're here to get Rand and Ron back on the right path. People say, well, Ron didn't do this, Rand did. Look, Ron Paul announced last Thursday, the same day, that, hey, we're not going to win the delegates now. The same day Rand came out and did that, and we haven't seen any comments from either one of them. This is a firestorm, and I understand they're just the focal point and been the focal point. Ron Paul said that himself, but we want to continue them on the right path. I don't want to sit here and watch them burn for my ego. That makes me feel terrible. I'm invested in Ron Paul and Rand Paul, but enough of my ranting. I've got a bunch of questions for Chuck Baldwin, Pastor Chuck Baldwin, Patriot Chuck Baldwin, who's never compromised. Great articles he writes, radio shows he does, amazing info we carry at Infowars.com. His website's chuckbaldwinlive.com. He joins us now. Now, I didn't ask him during the break what his view is. I talked to him a few minutes. We're going to find out now from Chuck his view. If he disagrees with me, I kind of hope he does. I hope he tells me I'm wrong. Or am I right about this being a big deal? Look, the supporters out there, we've run polls. One poll was 95%. Latest poll is 85%. Are very upset. So regardless, Ron Paul, Rand Paul need to respond. But enough of me. Chuck Baldwin joins us to talk about this and a lot more after we cover this subject. Chuck joining us by the phone from Montana, where he's there trying to create a remnant of folks that are awake and involved ahead of this globalist operation. You heard my take on this. I haven't heard yours yet. We're about 5 days into this firestorm. A, do you agree it's a firestorm? And B, what is your view on this situation?
Yeah, it is a fire. There's no doubt about it. I'm very disappointed. I'm not surprised, quite frankly, but I'm very disappointed at what Rand has done. I think I understand why he's done it. I mean, he's taking the typical pragmatic approach to positioning himself to be able to run for president. If Obama wins, then in 2016, and if Romney wins, then a little bit later on down the road. He doesn't want to anger the GOP establishment. He wants to ingratiate himself with the power brokers inside the GOP, and he's positioning himself for a run for president or, at the least, vice president at some point in the near future. So we understand how the game is played, don't we? I mean, we know what goes on. We've been at this a long time. We know what's going on here. However, this is Rand Paul. This is the son of Dr. Ron Paul. This is the son of the greatest congressman in the history of the United States of America. This is the son of the man who is the iconic representative of the patriot movement throughout the United States of America. So for Rand to do this, it brings it into a different dimension. Now, I'm going to be a little bit softer on Ron than you are. Ron has not endorsed Ron has not made a public statement relative to what Rand has done or to the Romney candidacy. I will be very surprised, personally, if Ron does endorse Mitt Romney. I don't think he will. Did he and Rand talk about it before the decision was made publicly? Oh, I'm sure they did. But this is still Rand's decision. I think Ron is going to maintain his no-compromise position. I think if Ron came out and endorsed Mitt Romney, it would be perceived as a sellout of the absolute worst magnitude. It would be an atomic blast, politically speaking, as far as the Patriot movement is concerned. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to risk his reputation, his honor, his credibility, his integrity, and all that he's worked for over 2.5 decades by doing something such as that. I don't think he will. Now, Rand did it. That's bad enough. And many of the rank-and-file patriots around the country are now coalescing around one position or another. I think by the time the dust settles, you're probably going to have somewhere between a third and a half of the what we would call the patriots are probably going to follow Rand into this attempt to bring the movement into the mainstream GOP. It never works. It's never worked. We've tried it before. It's never worked. But I think probably a third or more are going to follow Rand. I think you're going to have a half to 2/3 of the patriot, liberty-minded movement that are probably not going to go. They're going to maintain the credibility and integrity of the movement. I think they're going to stay out of it. I think they're going to continue the movement that Ron has begun, the no compromise, we're not going to play games with evil kind of mentality, and I don't think they will go along. But there's no question that there is a divide in the patriot movement now with Rand doing what he's done, and I'm very disappointed.
I'm just speechless by what you're saying because it's so dead on. You've crystallized what I've tried to explain in hours on air in the last few days. I feel personally hurt because I ignored a lot of the signs that Rand was turning in the wrong direction when my listeners brought it up the last 6 months and said, no, that's not true. And then finally, when he endorsed Romney so enthusiastically, and I saw the coordination with the Ron Paul campaign saying, oh, yeah, we're not going to win the delegates now. I mean, I knew they weren't going to win months ago, but they kind of kept people going along to maintain the support. And I thought Rand Paul must have some plan. Ron Paul must have some plan. And then now I've seen the response. Finally, Rand did an interview yesterday, and I mean, there's an incredible quote where he said, there are things between good and evil. Sounds like that, famous statement people make before they start compromising to it. And look, he without sin, let him cast the first stone. I'm not on some high horse either, but this is, as you said, Rand Paul, who ran in Kentucky as a chip off the old block. Apple didn't fall too far from the tree. But my gut, my spirit, my discernment, when I learned this Friday morning, because I'd gone to bed early that night when he made the announcement, I hadn't heard it till Friday morning about 6 a.m. when I got up, was a punch in the stomach. And my gut, my discernment, my spirit's never wrong. I always, previously ignore it, only at my own peril. And I can hear, Rand say, well, he thought people would be disillusioned with this, but he thinks it's the right thing to do to play politics. Well, you know what? If he thought that, he should have come out and given a press conference and said, I don't agree with a lot of stuff, Romney does, but we've got to position ourselves and take the party over. Instead, I see Ron Paul saying, be respectful when they cheat you out of the delegates. Basically is what's been said. Hey, I may not go to the Liberty Fest, big, huge event that's been planned for months. Now that may make the Republicans unhappy. My point is trying to get the Republicans to like Ron Paul and Rand Paul. They'd have to totally sell out to do that. The whole system cheated them, blocked them, demonized them, didn't cover the polls when they won. I just wonder, what are they thinking? I mean, you've been at national level politics. You know both the men as I do. And you've given us great discernment here, crystallizing it on the lay of the land. Why do you think they did this? I mean, where do you think this came from no compromise to 180 degrees, at least from Rand. And again, Ron hasn't spoken, so that gives a lot of acquiescence to this. Chuck Baldwin, what do you make of this? Why do you think they did this? I mean, I understand you said, hey, we know how politics works. I saw editorials saying 2 words for people mad at Rand: grow up and you're stupid. No, I get how politics works, but we have 99 other senators if we want to just have somebody play politics. I mean, they talk to us like we're dumb, and I think that's only making people angrier. I mean, I'm ranting here, Pastor, but what do you make of what I've said here?
No, yeah, I hear you. And I think what we're dealing with is, I think we're dealing with Rand. I think we're dealing with Rand Paul. I have always questioned in my mind whether or not Rand was the same quality of man as his dad was. And I just always had that suspicion. It was just a question. I wasn't sure in my own heart and soul that Rand was ever committed to the same principles that Ron was. The old cliche is, well, time will tell. And so he's elected, he runs on the Tea Party, he runs on his dad's name, he wins. And, there was a few things that he said right after he was elected senator from Kentucky that kind of raised my eyebrows. I said, Ron would never say that. Okay, he's not Ron Paul, he's his son. I've got a son who's very engaged in political issues, and he and I don't see eye to eye on everything either. But there were some things that Rand was saying early on that gave me a little heartburn. And I thought, wow, is this me, or is it, what is this? So let's just see what happens. Well, I think we're seeing what has happened. I think we're dealing with Rand Paul. I don't think Rand shares his dad's convictions, especially as it relates to foreign policy.
Why Rand was right to endorse Ron.
And that's been the one big difference with Ron Paul. That's the thing that has set him apart from every other so-called conservative politician in Washington, D.C. You've got a whole bunch of them out there. They're conservative this, conservative that, and when it comes to domestic issues, they are conservative, quote unquote. But the thing that separates Ron Paul from all of them, and the thing that has given him the energy and the momentum and the respect that he has, is his uncompromising stand on constitutional government as it relates to foreign policy. Now, what do we got? We got a guy now with Rand Paul who apparently does not share the same convictions that his dad has relative to foreign policy. I mean, to go back to the interview that he had with Sean Hannity just recently, and he talked about the meeting that he had with Romney. And they talked about all these issues upon which they agreed. And all of the issues that they agreed on were issues that were, not for lack of a better word, they were the fluffy domestic issues that, you wouldn't have a lot of difficulty disagreeing on with just about anybody who called themselves a Republican conservative.
Yeah, it's not that abortion isn't absolutely important, or gay marriage, homosexual marriage. The point is it's injected as something to never be settled to get us fighting with each other instead of the Foreign Federal Reserve running the country.
Well, everything that is collapsing our country today relates to America's foreign policy. And that includes this police state that is being created by this super surveillance state that's going on. That's all happening as a result of this unconstitutional globalist foreign policy that's been dictating the State Department and all the other international agencies of the federal government since at least the Carter days. All right? So that's the thing that has set Ron Paul apart. He has refused to compromise on those issues. He has steadfastly championed the constitutional position on a just foreign policy decision-making process from the executive branch of the federal government, whether it be Democrat or Republican. He's never compromised on that. He stood foursquare on that. And I think that's where we're seeing the separation between Ron and Rand. Rand must not, this is my opinion based upon what he's done, he must not share those core convictions relative to foreign policy, because here's the thing. When he says he's going to support Mitt Romney, that means he's going to support the war in Iran, the war in Syria, a continued war of aggression in the Middle East. This is going to be an expansion and an extension of everything that started under G.W. Bush and then continued under Barack Obama.
Exactly, and he admits 2 years ago after winning, he made a pilgrimage to meet with the top neocons and basically kiss their ring. And again, they say give up our rights because of Al-Qaeda, and then it's in the news they're using Al-Qaeda to take over Libya and now Syria, and Al-Qaeda says they're going to kill all the Jews in Syria and expel the Christians, and Hillary Clinton's making up massacres and stuff. I'm not saying Assad's a good guy, but I mean, this is so crazy. And and again, Romney is literally like the devil. I mean, if it was like Charles Key or somebody, you know, who's a mainline Republican but exposes corruption, you know, from a state level, and he endorsed him, I'd like that. Or if it was somebody, you know, at a national level, they were endorsing him who wasn't perfect on every issue. Because you can judge the man or the woman, are they somebody of principle? I mean, I don't agree with a lot of things Jesse Ventura says, but at least he sticks to what he's actually believing in. You know, not that I would even supposedly vote for him, but I mean, but now to just see Rand with this disconnect, himself on radio with Peter Schiff yesterday, and his surrogates saying, we want the Republicans to like us, so we're going to go with what the party establishment wants. That idea is 180 degrees the opposite of Ron Paul.
Yeah. It never works. I mean, I'm just a little shocked at that position, because historically it's never worked. I mean, let's go back to the 1970s and early 1980s when Ronald Reagan, you know, first came to power.
We'll do that in a minute, but Chuck, it works if you're selling out.
Yeah, it works. That's right. It works if you don't really care about the principles that you say you espouse. It works if you don't mind this you know, slow motion suicide kind of a thing going on, where you never gain any ground and you're always going backward. You know, but you yourself are being advanced politically, or you know, whatever. Yeah, it works.
Very well said. Very well said. Slow motion suicide. I want you to finish your point about Reagan, but I want to put an article on screen here that Steve Watson did with a transcript of Rand Paul yesterday on Peter Schiff's show. And this is a quote. He said, there are definitely things in between good and evil. And I got to be honest with you, in my life, I have learned that statement is the essence of what the devil says to you when he tries to get you to start compromising. I mean, that is literally, in my experience, that idea of, oh, do a little bad for the good. That's where everything begins to fall down. As a pastor, am I wrong or am I right?
No, you're exactly right. Incrementalism has always served the side of globalism and evil, wickedness, and slavery. You know, we've been in this incremental fight, and we fight it like that. Oh, we got to get it. You know, we didn't get this way overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And that's just so much hooey. Every great exercise of revolution, and I'm not talking about necessarily violent revolution, but
has been zero compromise. Zero compromise.
Every revolution has always been a dramatic, sudden, catastrophic kind of event. You don't get anywhere incrementally except going downward. If you're going to break the yoke of this chain that we're in, you're going to have to do it suddenly. You're going to have to do it violently, and you're going to have to do it in a manner in which you're unwilling to accept the compromises of the status quo, and you are demanding that people rise up for a cause and a principle of righteousness. And the people accept the call, they see it, they rise up, and they bring that restoration, whatever it is, to the culture, to the community. That's what we have to do, and that's what Ron Paul has championed, and that's why his movement is so large, and it's why that it's been so successful. Now, this is a very unfortunate tack that Rand has taken. You know, I think if he would have just maintained the conviction that his dad has maintained all through his career, and kept that same spirit about him, he would have been the no question heir apparent, and he would have received all of the the following, the respect, the support of Ron's followers, plus the ones that he would naturally attract, being a younger guy, and some of the people that would be attracted to Rand for whatever reasons would come on as well. But now he's going to alienate at least 50% of Ron's supporters. He's going to identify himself as someone who's not principled on the issues and is willing to compromise with the establishment. And whatever he gains out of it personally, the patriot movement, the freedom movement in America is going to suffer.
And as you know, it's all an illusion. There is nothing personal. It's all what you gain for true liberty and freedom. And wow, what you just said, Pastor, is so incredibly powerful. And I just feel so sorry for Rand Paul, because he had everything. I knew in my gut that if he just stayed the course, he was going to end up being president down the road. He was going to be such an important George Washington type person. But I looked at the man, I'd met with the man. I too said there was something almost too gentlemanly about him, that he was someone that just wanted to work with everyone. Well, you can't work with pure, concentrated evil. You can try to take people that are corrupt and weak because of the flesh and change them. That's myself every day. But you're not going to change things that have given themselves over consciously to evil. And the idea that he believes you can compromise and get patted on the head by Mr. Flip-Flop, Mr. Abortion, Mr. New World Order, Mitt Romney, just shows bankruptcy in a fundamental judgment area. And it shows that, it's all the more sad because Rand Paul's clearly a good guy, that they've been deceived. And I'll tell you a story. I went to dinner Friday night with my dad. I never go out with my dad with dinner alone, but my mom was out of town and my wife had the kids, and so we were both getting off work late. I said, hey, let's go get dinner. So I meet my dad, and he walks right up to me. And I just said at the office at like 7 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock that I think this is a trap. I hadn't said this on air, but I want to get your take on this. I haven't said this yet. I said, I think this is a trap. They're so sophisticated at the globalist Mitt Romney level. They understand how humans work, how they operate. They've gotten to these levels because they're good at it, that they convinced him he'd get the VP or was in the running. If he would just do this and work with them, they know it's going to really hurt the Paul brand name of No Compromise, Dr. No. They know Rand's real power is that he's the son, heir apparent to this, which humans instinctively know is important. If you got a good father, the son's probably going to be pretty good generally. And that, simply what my dad said, I think they figured this out and are suckering Rand Paul. They've told him he's going to get all this great stuff and going to end up saving the liberty movement and doing all this, and that they're really his friends and that they agree with his point of view, and that, oh, come on in, do this, and that they were really setting him up to partially cripple himself or destroy himself and hurt his father, while at the same time giving power to Romney. And my dad was telling me this, and this is exactly what I'd said 30 minutes before to the crew. And in my final equation, I think that's what happened. And I said last Friday, and I said last Sunday, and today, I said if he doesn't reverse himself, it only gets worse. There's nothing wrong with clarifying, not even saying, hey, I'm wrong, but hey, let me clarify. But if their handlers come out and say, no, this is politics, you people are too stupid, it'll backfire even more. Now, that's a long rant describing what I just said, but Chuck Baldwin, what's your take on that?
No, I think your dad's observation was spot on. I think that was great. This is what they do. They try to take a guy who has a following and who's built the following on a principle, who has a passionate conviction about whatever it is, and they try to bring a guy in like that, pat him on the back, and say, "Oh yeah, you're doing this is great, but you just need a little bit of a sophistication here. You need to see the big picture, and we're going to help you." And they bring them in and they make wine them and dine them and make them feel like that they're really important to what they're doing, and then of course as you just said, it's a trap. They don't care anything about Rand Paul. They don't care anything about Ron Paul. They don't care anything about you and me and the people out there across America that believe in liberty and are passionate about freedom. They don't care anything about us. But they will use anybody they can to their advantage. And in this particular case, I think Rand is playing right into their hand. I really do. And I think that that's a great observation on behalf of your father. And I think that he's learned that through a lot of life experience. And I said that to you, what is Rand going to do now for the next 4 years? Let's just assume that Romney gets elected. What is Rand going to do? Rand is going to have to toe the line for Mitt Romney. I mean, he's already come out. He's publicly endorsed him. He has identified himself with him now. He's part of the establishment position. The lesser of two evils, and we're going to go with the Republican no matter what. We all know what Romney's like, but we're going to go with him anyway because he's a Republican. So what's he going to do for the next 4 years? Where's the message of freedom going to come from? Where's the Dr. No message going to come from for the next 4 years? Ron Paul's retiring from Congress, and we got some good guys that may be going up there. Steve Stockman's down there in Charlie Wilson's district, and it looks like he might win, and he'll be a good voice for us from Texas. But I mean, you just don't replace Ron Paul in one session. Who's going to be the voice of freedom? Who's going to be the voice of constitutional government on Capitol Hill with Ron Paul gone and Rand Paul in the back pocket of Mitt Romney for 4 years? I mean, you see, he's been muted. He's been neutered for 4 years. He's going to have to toe the line. He can't come out now and say, oh, I disagree with that, and I disagree with this, and I oppose this war, and I'm against this war. He's going to have to go along with Mitt Romney, whatever Mitt Romney says. So that will effectively have taken out the standard bearer, or at least the name of the standard bearer that was out front on behalf of all of us who believe in constitutional government for the last 2.5 decades. All that's now gone. So I think it is a net loss for freedom-loving people, constitutionalists, libertarian-minded conservatives, etc. And it is a net gain for the globalists, the New World Order types.
Exactly. It is, and it's so sad. And I begged them Friday and over the weekend to come out and just explain to people, hey, we know it's not perfect, and criticize Romney some and say we're going to be steadfast. But I've already seen them change course, especially Rand, on so many issues. Ron's talking about not even going now to the big, counter event they were going to have. I mean, the word is, I was told this by high-level Republicans, that they've told Rand he may get the VP. I think they're going to betray him. Maybe they don't need to. He's shown, like you said, it's like Darth Vader. It's like Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. And I don't think Rand Paul even realizes this yet. And I guess he was an eye doctor. He didn't have the passion his dad did to try to get into politics immediately. I remember 10 years ago getting Rand on, campaigning for his dad. I'd talked to him a few times. And I'm talking about it so much because it's a lesson to us all that you can't trust in any man. You could have a brain aneurysm. They could put you on drugs. They could put a copycat out. They could threaten. Everybody's got a lever. And so I think at the end of the day, you can only trust in God and trust in the basic Bill of Rights, Constitution. But I mean, just imagine George Washington compromising with King George. Imagine Ron Paul not endorsing Pastor Chuck Baldwin 4 years ago, but endorsing John McCain. I mean, it's just such a departure from what we knew. And now to be told we should grow up and we're stupid because that's the new thing being put out by their surrogates. I mean, no, I'm not stupid. I get the game, like you said, but Ron Paul and Rand Paul were supposed to be different. And they say, oh, no, Rand's not Ron. Really? The fundraiser stuff I got in the mail, the money I gave him said he was. Pastor, Dr. Baldwin, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's what, to me, makes it more tragic is the fact that Ron is not going to be in Congress next session. If he were still going to be up there with that bully pulpit of his, at least that voice for freedom and constitutional government would still be coming out of Washington, D.C. from Ron Paul. But he's retiring. So his voice is not going to be up there anymore. And Rand now is going to be muted by the fact that he's supporting Romney. So he won't be able to exercise, those convictions and principles of constitutional government, even if he really in his heart believes them. He's now committed to Mitt Romney, and he knows that, and he made that decision. So that's why I'm saying that this leaves us without a real voice and leader in Washington, D.C. for these issues. And I'm not willing to. At this point, I'm not willing to suggest that Ron Paul is is a part of this in the sense that he's going to come out and endorse Romney at a later point. I will tell you that I will be the most shocked person on earth if Ron does that. I don't believe he will.
Yeah, he might as well commit seppuku. He might as well commit political suicide on air if he thinks of doing that. I totally agree with you. But in a way, this shows us that we've got to individually take over our local towns and cities politically, as you're doing there in Montana, educating people instead of just fighting in Washington. But this is like biblical. This is like a biblical story. I mean, the way this is happening, truth is stranger than fiction.
Well, one of the things that happens when a nation goes into judgment is that God takes away the leaders. I mean, the true quality leaders, men of integrity and power and so forth. And, we'd kind of hope that Rand would be the guy that would, at Washington, D.C., that would take the Ron Paul revolution and continue to build it. But obviously now we know that he's not going to do that. He has already, in effect, dismantled the Ron Paul revolution to some degree. To what degree, we don't know yet.
Given up his birthright.
Yeah, he did. Okay, that's a good way of saying it. I think so. I think he gave up his birthright.
It's totally biblical. I mean, I'm not just saying this because you're a pastor. This is just striking me like Shakespeare or the Bible. I mean, it's so intense to watch. He's got all this real righteous power built up and all these people totally behind him. And then he does this. Everybody gets mad. And they're like, why are you upset? I'm just compromising. And it's like, well, your father didn't do that. And he says, I'm not my father. And then he's upset that we're like, okay, I guess you're not. I mean, what do you expect us to do?
Well, like I said, when he was first elected, in my mind, in my heart, I just had a suspicion that he didn't share his father's convictions. And it was just a gut feeling more than anything. And I was willing to give the guy time and wait and see. I mean, I was very hopeful that he did. But there was just something in my heart that just made me wonder. And, of course, now then I realized that my gut instinct was right. But I think it's important that for the people that really believe in constitutional government, that we stick with the message, regardless of who the individual leaders might be that kind of rise to the top at whatever level to be the spokesman. And, Ron has said many times, it never was about him. It's always about the message. It's always about freedom. It's always about Constitution. It's about liberty, etc. He said that how many times? And it's true. It is. So, we're now at a passing of the torch kind of era in our country. And I think, the torch at this point is going to be passed to all the rest of us.
No, I agree. I think this can be actually a big win in the final equation where people realize, hey, Ron Paul's not going to do it all. You're going to have to do it. And this country is going into a very, very dark time. But getting back to the biblical angles from this, because I want to talk about your book, some Romans 13 that we provide and sell at Infowars.com, and have a few other questions for you here tonight. But who was the disciple who denied Christ multiple times before the cock crowed?
Thomas.
Yeah, so the doubting Thomas. Again, I hate to keep comparing it to that historically, but maybe Rand Paul is going to change. I mean, we don't know, and I think the pressure that we put on him or the points that we put in front of him may actually have an effect. But my gut does say that he really believes the decision he's made is the right one.
I think you're right. I think he will stand by the decision he's made. I would not look for him to recant what he's done. So I think that part of it's been settled. When he made his decision, I think he knew what he was doing, and he was bound to stick with it. I don't see him recanting that decision in any shape, manner, or form.
When you watch the Sean Hannity, at first he talks real slow, like he's about to jump off a cliff, and then you could tell he was not enjoying it, and that was worse. I mean, I say he's a good guy, and of course we're analyzing this, but I mean, he really hesitated. His body language was he didn't like saying that. It would have been better if he really believed it. I mean, do you agree with that statement?
Well, Alex, when a guy says, "Does he really believe?" I mean, he's done what he's done. For his sake, I hope he kind of believes what he's done, because if he's deliberately done what he knows to be the wrong thing to do, then I pity him. I pity his soul. I pity his conscience. I pity his relationship with God. I hope he believes he's doing the right thing, or he wouldn't do it. I mean, God help him if he knows in his heart of hearts that he's doing the wrong thing and he's doing it anyway.
Well, to be clear, I mean, what I got from the body language, it was pretty clear, is he consciously, intellectually, he's made excuses and thinks it's the right thing to do. But you could tell his gut when he said it. I mean, it was I'm gonna endorse Mitt Romney. I mean, he could barely say it. I don't know. I'm overanalyzing it. Well, the die is cast, as they say. I want to get into Romans 13 with you, Pastor, but I have a list of things, just quick points. I'd like to get a minute on each point from you, and then find out what's most on your radar screen. Obviously, the Rand Paul thing, because we've been talking 35 minutes about it. What do you make of the announcement of drones armed against us, NDAA, secret arrest, Congress being told the UN and NATO are in charge of our military? I mean, everything you talked about 15 years ago, I talked about 15 years ago, that G. Edward Griffin talked about 30, 40 years ago, Ron Paul talked about. I mean, it's all happening. All those old-timers that had accurately gauged what was going to happen, had the sources. It's really been proven. But and even though I knew it intellectually, to watch it all coming to pass, to watch the world government being announced, I mean, these are amazing times. So what's your view of the world right now on those points I just brought up?
I think it's increasing exponentially. It's no longer a secret. We've got, 30,000 drones that have been ordered that are going to be flying over the continental United States of America, and that many of these drones are going to be armed with more than just cameras. They are going to be armed with munitions. We've got the NDAA still in effect, even after a federal judge in New York ruled that the indefinite detention provision of NDAA is not constitutional. In spite of that, the Congress, the very next day, went ahead and reauthorized NDAA for the year 13 and included the indefinite detention provision of NDAA. That was after a federal judge in New York City ruled the day before that provision was not constitutional. The Congress turns right around the very next day and reintroduces it to NDAA 13. So, it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat on Capitol Hill or in the White House. This bent toward a police state, toward this global governance, and turning our military. Now we've got the U.S. Army Chief of Staff is on record as saying that it's up to the U.S. Army to facilitate domestic law enforcement against American citizens.
Yeah, that was put out by the Council on Foreign. So we have members of the government that's coming out, head of the Army, saying in the CFR, we're foreign commanded and we're going to have local military respond for the police. Exactly. I mean, it's all going into hyperdrive. Why?
Well, because I think they know they've got the momentum, and I think they've got the opportunity that they haven't had in probably ever. Start to say in decades, but ever. I don't think they've ever had an opportunity like they have today to go ahead and implement all these things that they've been trying to implement. For how long? How long has this been going on, Alex? I mean, this is going on for decades and decades.
And what, behind the scenes quietly, exactly, this giant secret program is now decloaking, which means they're about to launch it. Is it stage terror, bioweapons? I mean, clearly they want war with the people. What is it they've got planned that's so horrible they know we're going to resist, and they've got to have all this ready? I mean, wow. I mean,
yeah, well, that's the question that none of us know. But the fact is, all of the handwriting's on the wall. I mean, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure this out here. I mean, you've got a federal government that is in positioning itself to declare war on the American citizenry. I mean, I don't know how to say it. It seems to me that all of these things that have been going on have now come to fruition. And what's going to be the seismic event? That's going to be the starting gun that's going to unleash all these laws and all these executive orders and so forth. And nobody knows. Nobody knows what, nobody knows when. But the fact is that all of the preparations are in place. I mean, people are talking about it openly. There's not even really, they're not trying to hide it anymore.
Oh, yeah. What did you think when the Army, we got that document, just like my ex saying you were basically a terrorist and Ron Paul was. And people didn't believe it for a week till the government admitted it. We got the Army document saying re-education camps for political dissidents in America and how to isolate us. And then the Army came out a week later and said, yeah, that's ours. I mean, what did you think? I mean, it's like even I can't believe. Really? You even call them re-education camps? I mean, I'm not going to a re-education camp.
Yeah, that's what I say. The opportunity that they have, I think they feel, is an opportunity that has been their time to come. And
well, I agree with you, but I think they're doing it because they know there's a wake-up happening.
Well, they're probably going to orchestrate the wake-up. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that anything that happens of that nature is accidental. Do you?
No, I don't. And let's be clear from history. Let's see if you agree with my basic analysis, and biblically as well, which is history. The elites are guided by an evil force. Call it the devil, Diablo, whatever you want. The color out of space, as Lovecraft called it. They always set themselves up for their own destruction. They're intelligent, but they're not wise. And I agree with you. I think things have to get really bad, and the judgment is actually the wake-up. I think the hedge of protection lowering, the shields are down, like Star Trek, the Klingons can now fire, they've uncloaked. I believe this is the beginning of the victory. What do you say to that?
I'm very optimistic, Alex. I believe that there's a God in heaven, and I believe that this God in heaven loves liberty, and he loves people who love liberty. And I believe that there still is a opportunity and a land for liberty in this country. I don't think for 1 minute that God is going to abandon the people that believe in liberty. And how exactly he plans on reestablishing liberty in this country, I don't know. I don't have the mind of God, but I am very optimistic for the fact that no matter what the globalists and what the elitists have in store for us and how powerful they think they are, that there are still millions and millions of people across this country that believe in freedom, they believe in God, they believe in liberty, and the principles enshrined in our Constitution, our Declaration and Bill of Rights, and they are not going to lay down, roll over, and just let liberty be destroyed in this country. They're just not going to do it. And I believe that God is going to raise up a remnant. I think he's already doing it. We're seeing it here in our neck of the woods. Other places around the country are seeing it as well. And I'm optimistic that whatever the elites have in store for us, I think God is greater than they are, and liberty is certainly greater than tyranny.
Well, you said it. In closing, we sell your book. It's excellent. Every pastor in America should be given this, because I've gone to church after church here in Austin, and they're good people. They're awake. They love God. They're awake in that. I mean, you could, and I run to my listeners, but it's then a worship of the police state and, do what you're told. And they're not even so much clergy response team, but above them is that. Even in small churches, it's Hitler's favorite verse, do what the government says, it's God. Well, we're the people, we are the government. And I know your book breaks this down. It's short, it's sweet, it's very well written. It's available at Infowars.com. Even if you're not a Christian out there, folks, 80% or 75% say they are. They go to church, and the average church is not a church. It's now a charity. It's government-controlled. It's their brainwashing people. This is such a key weapon to get to your pastors. In fact, I keep forgetting there's a little church down the street, a Baptist church, where we've been 2 or 3 times, and they're good people, but there's always some government worship in there. And I'm going to go give this to the pastor. Actually, I'm going to do it this Sunday. Romans 13, The True Meaning of Submission, 2nd edition. Timothy Baldwin is a constitutional lawyer's son, and Chuck Baldwin, of course, who's on with us now. Spend 5 minutes. You've got the floor, Pastor, in closing, to tell us about the book and the basic facts of is worship of the government what we're supposed to do? Because my whole Old Testament and New Testament is nothing but resistance to corrupt governments. But, I guess I'm reading a different Bible than the folks pushing this.
Yeah, maybe you must be reading the real Bible. If you were to take out all the examples in both testaments of the men and women who resisted civil authority because that civil authority trampled upon their convictions as people of God, you would probably eliminate 3/4 of the Bible. Most of the examples of Scripture relative to the men and women of Scripture relate to the resistance to civil government in one form or another. So that's the history of Christianity. It's the history of America. I get really perturbed at these pastors who say on the one hand that the founding fathers were, illegal and criminal whenever they revolted against the crown and fought our war for independence on the one hand, and then every July 4th they'll have these patriotic services in their churches and extol the virtues of the United States of America and the founding fathers for bringing this country into existence. On the other hand, I mean, you can't have it both ways, and that's exactly what they try to do. The Bible from Old and New Testament gives proper jurisdiction to all authority, whether it's governmental authority, whether it's family authority, vocational authority. Every authority has a jurisdiction given by God. God is the only sovereign. He's the only king of the universe. He's the only one who has power and authority over all. To men, he gives limited authority. And with that limitation comes jurisdiction. And each jurisdiction has the responsibility to understand what is that jurisdiction and understand what is that authority, and then to relate to that authority based upon how they accept the responsibility. When they live within the confines of truth and the jurisdiction that God has granted them, they should be submitted to. They should be respected. They should be obeyed, as we all try to do those that are in authority. But when that authority figure oversteps that boundary, whenever he oversteps that jurisdiction that God has given him, then he becomes a tyrant. And he deserves not our respect, nor does he deserve our obedience. We are required by God to resist an evil, unlawful authority. Because when we do that, we've allowed that tyrant to become like God over us. And we have no other gods except God over us. That's the very first and greatest commandment. So we cannot allow anyone in a limited jurisdictional role to overstep that boundary that God has given them in their authority without becoming idolaters. If we allow a government or a pastor or a husband or father or a boss at work or a policeman or anybody else to overstep that God-given boundary, that God-given jurisdiction that he has from his Creator, we, the person that submits to that tyranny, we have become an idolater.
Well, that's right. And if you look at the communist Chinese, they won't even allow Falun Gong to do exercises. Communism, total government, always is at war with religion, period, but especially Christianity, because it wants to be the God. And I remember sitting in church as a kid going, don't have idols. I didn't know what that meant, a golden calf. It's the worship of that system, putting it first. And it's not God trying to run our lives and control us. God's saying, follow these basic rules or you're going to be slaves. I mean, it's so simple.
Exactly right. And that's why Tim and I wrote the book, because of this fallacious, erroneous interpretation of Romans 13, obey the government no matter what, which is prevalent among churches large and small all over the country. And I'm convinced if we don't awaken the pastors to the true meaning of Romans chapter 13, we're not going to have real restoration of liberty in this country. It's essential that the clergy awaken to their duty before God relative to the issues of liberty and freedom, and the understanding of Romans chapter 13, and not just that passage, but the entire passage of Scripture as it relates to this topic, must be identified and understood. And so that's why we felt it was so important to write this book.
Well, I agree with you, and it's simple. I mean, look, it was pastors that led the Revolutionary War. It was pastors that led the fight against slavery everywhere, and the system knows that. That's why they've taken it over. It was Hitler's favorite passage, Romans 13, that he was there because God put him in charge. Total distortion when you actually read it in whole, and this is such an important book, Romans 13, The True Meaning of Submission, 2nd edition, available at Infowars.com. Pastor Chuck Baldwin, I think I may have missed it, but I think this is your first big official response that I've seen to the Rand Paul controversy. I think this will really help people navigate. I think you've said in just 30 minutes of the hour-long interview, or it's almost 50 minutes long, what I've tried to say in almost a week of floundering around, just trying to analyze every issue, every facet of it. But thank you so much for joining us. I think in the 15 years or so I've been interviewing, I think this is the best and most important interview we've ever done.
Well, thank you, Alice. I'm honored to be on the show. Keep up the good work, and yeah, let's just pray for our country and pray for all the people out there that really believe in freedom and liberty and constitutional government, and pray that God will give us wisdom and courage to stay the course.
Well, if we didn't ever need any proof of how real all this is, look at everything unfolding in front of us. I mean, that's one thing about this world and God, is that you get lots of chances to make the right decision. I mean, how out in the open does this evil have to get before people wake up and say no to it? I mean, it is so cartoon level, off the charts, crazy. They're going to ban in New York now popcorn and milk, saying it's unhealthy. The UN's running our local governments under. I mean, when does it end? I mean, and this is just the beginning.
Yep, and that's what made Ron Paul so successful for all these years, is he understood the real issue. He didn't compromise with evil, and he understood the globalist agenda. And he was a tremendous voice, and I will still believe that he will maintain that fidelity. I just do not believe that he's going to endorse Romney, and I think that he'll continue to be a force to be reckoned with, even though he's out of Congress. And I would like to think that those of us that have been supporting him and others like him around the country for the last several years, that we're just going to increase in size and strength and determination and enthusiasm, and we're just not going to let the enemy prevail. We're just not going to do it.
Absolutely. We can't turn this into a rout and demoralization. It's actually a lesson. Thank you, Pastor.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Wow, that was an in-depth interview. 2 big interviews tonight. The guys are so dedicated in there. I'm like, we need to make the show 30 minutes long, and it's going to be 5 hours because of Wes in there, and also John, Marcos, everybody. We got a skeleton crew. We're putting out even more powerful, informative shows every evening. If you believe in what we're doing, you don't have to buy anything at Infowars.com or become a PrisonPlanet.tv member. We have a 15-day free trial right now. All you got to do is spread the word about this show. Send out this video when you see it posted later on the web from PrisonPlanet.tv to everybody you know. Spread the word about what we're doing, because that's what we're after, hearts and minds. I just want to get people to think for themselves. And look, if you're turned off by having a pastor on here that Ron Paul endorsed for president 4 years ago, that's your problem. The ideas of liberty are transcendent across the board. And this country was founded on these principles. And if you wonder why Christians support war and tyranny and the police state, it's because they're not even following what's in the Bible. They're following what these sold-out globalist preachers are telling them, and that's why this book is so important. So please support us. Get the book, Romans 13, at Infowars.com. But more importantly, get it and give it to your local pastor. Even if it's not your church, go give it to preachers. And please spread the word about what we're doing, because we are busting our butts on this worthy cause. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. All right, I'm Alex Jones signing off from the front lines of the Info War, another expanded edition. Sometimes this TV show is a little better than a radio show. This thing's got a fraction of the audience. So, again, help this message get out to everyone. All right, that's it. I run on. That's why I'm a talk show host. Hey, that guy ought to have a radio show. He never shuts up. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you, Lord willing, back tomorrow night and back on the radio, 12 noon Eastern, Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Romans 13, Hitler's favorite passage. Find out why.